All right, we're live. I don't think we're
Good
gonna have any
morning,
viewers.
Sarah.
Good morning. We're not on the Maidens of the Spear channel right
Are we
now.
on our own channel?
We're on like my channel, but it's not really anything yet.
Well,
So
we
it can
can
be it can be our
grow
own
our own.
channel.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
great.
can become our own channel. Right now it's called Sarah Isn't Panicking, but it can it can become anything. Um
Is that accurate?
no. Um that's what we in the comedy business call irony.
Why
Um
are you panicking?
just general collapse of society,
Oh, like macro level
macro level panicking, well, and
societal.
anxiety disorder. But um, yeah,
But it's like widespread panic, if you will.
yeah, it's not
Talk
like
about 2000s bands. We
I
haven't
said.
even gotten there yet, but
Oh, we
widespread
haven't.
panic is a 2000s band.
Okay. Turn the gain on your mic down just a tiny bit. You're
Am I
peaking a
am I
little.
too am I
You're
too close
peaking a
to
little
it?
bit. Yeah. I don't think you're too close. I think the gain's up a little high.
I don't even know what that means yet. I'm excited to get into audio though.
Yeah. The gain is like how much it's boosting the signal as it comes in.
How about now?
That sounds great.
Okay, great.
Cool. So this is live streamed for we have one person watching. Amazing. Hello, one person. If welcome to this stream wherein Scott and I are fucking they're gone. Scott and I are fucking around and trying to figure out what our podcast looks like. And Scott, let's just jump in. What do you think about calling it Nerd Squad?
I mean, it makes sense, right? We
It makes
are
sense.
the
Would you like to call it
king
something
and
else?
queen of Nerd Squad.
That's true. We can
At least
call
we
it.
were in 2011.
Yeah, maybe we should just call our channel that. We'll just be Nerd Squad.
I'm happy with that.
I feel like that also opens up a lot of space for like if you or Willow want to like record an album review. That could post to Nerd Squad. Why not?
Why not? I
Just
think
a
it's good.
squad of friends who are nerds. All right, so let's just treat it as though it were a real podcast episode, nice and fast and loose. I can edit this audio into the episode we actually release. So if you ever like say a thing and you're like, I wish I hadn't said that, just say that or like leave
Okay.
notes. Um,
I'll try not to get myself canceled on day one of a new podcast.
yeah, but it's okay if you do.
Oh, okay.
It's the
Thanks.
best time to get yourself canceled because you have
Doesn't
nothing to
matter.
lose. Um,
Well, I also feel like if anyone's going to help me not get canceled, it's you.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I've kind of been intrigued by the idea. Well, let's start the episode and um, so hello and welcome to episode 1 of Nerd Squad, where two best friends who also happen to be big nerds and super queer talk about whatever they're interested in at that
Whatever we
time.
want.
Yeah. My name is Sarah Kaplan, and this is
And
my
I'm
best
Scott
friend.
Wise.
That's right, my best friend Scott Wise. We've been best friends since we were 11,
When did
and
we meet?
we met 6th grade because we were both in McNair Johnson's 6th grade advisory.
Okay, that's funny because I remember meeting you in art class.
Art class?
Were we in the same advisory? That's awkward.
Yeah, we were in the same. You, me, and Andrew Sabatka.
Shout
Uh,
out Andrew.
Shout out Andrew Sabatka in the CIA or something now.
Well, because I was at our school before you, so you got there
Yeah,
in 6th grade, and I remember not knowing what to make of you yet. And then art class came along, and I had been kind of like the star art child. And then you come along, and you're better than me. And I was like, I can either be intimidated or join them.
yeah. And you know what? That's not. I don't remember that at all.
Well, right, no, that's my experience of what happened because you weren't even intimidated. You weren't on that level. You were like on a different
I,
playing field. I
I
see the
mean,
world through
honestly,
games, and you don't.
sure.
That's the difference.
I That's true. Which means that the topic for today is going to be pretty interesting for me to talk to you about because I think we probably experienced the movie very differently. Um,
I think that's what intrigues me about doing a podcast with you.
Yeah, we're very different. This is episode 1, so you don't know us. Quick backstory on who we are. We will eventually be meandering our way to a review of the movie Saltburn. Um, but first, Scott, what's like a who are you?
Who am I? Wow. That's actually what I'm trying to figure out in therapy right now.
So
But
true.
for I think it's a lifelong journey, but that's not helpful to actually describe my biography. Yeah, no, quick background is Sarah and I went to high school together, well, middle school and high school together. We both went off to our own colleges, and then within the same week told each other what we had not known for solid 12 years, that we were both queer. We
Yeah,
had literally never talked about it.
yeah, we were best friends since we were 11. We did not come out to each other until we were 24, because it's very cool of us.
Very cool of us.
Yeah,
But then we both went on our own journeys, and throughout the last 6, 7 years, we have at various times identified as different members of the LGBTQ community.
I think I've potentially identified as all 4 just by myself.
Okay, there's a lot more than four.
Oh, sorry, I meant like
You're
the LGBTQ.
you're trying to get yourself canceled day
The
one.
LGBTQ, I've definitely hit all 5 at some point in my life. Um,
That's
I'm a
very impressive.
for those who don't know us and who are listening to the audio medium, I'm a trans woman, and at this point I'm a P. My various letters are T P with like a lowercase a. Um,
Okay, P and A are not on LGBTQ. So can you explain?
sure. So trans, and then I consider myself I consider myself pansexual and lesbian. That's a different conversation that we can get into. But if you know, you know. And lowercase a, I mean that I'm like on the kind of the A spectrum. Like sex isn't like super important to me.
I identify as a cis gay man. And whatever the opposite of asexual is, that would be me.
True.
I'm
Scott,
the
what do you do for work?
I'm the opposite end of that spectrum. I am the chief operating officer of a brand called Nasty Pig, and we make men's apparel for
I always
gay and queer
describe
people
it.
who are.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
I
you describe it. I'm curious
I
to hear
always
what you think
describe
about
it
it.
as like gay men's lingerie because I think that's how you described it to me when you started working there.
I've told I'd like try something out every time I tell people, depending on who they are. I told a group of straight people recently that it was a lifestyle brand. If your lifestyle is slut,
Sure, but
and I
this
think
is
that actually pretty much describes
specifically
it.
this is like the mask for mask, buff guy for buff guy brand.
Yes,
So when
correct.
I
It
say
is.
lingerie, don't imagine like lacy panties. Imagine like workout tanks. Um,
Yes, it is very rooted in masculine identity and what we grew up with, bodybuilders and boy bands and all sorts of different types of masculine archetypes,
mhm.
and making it queer and making it acceptable for someone who identifies as any way they want to still wear that kind of thing and feel sexy in it.
Yeah, which is cool.
I
Not
love my
relevant,
job.
not relevant to me or my life, but cool. Uh, and I don't I don't have a clear job title. I do a variety of things. I tutor teenagers who hopefully will never encounter this podcast. I uh, I work on sets sometimes as a carpenter. I am an improv performer. I do a variety of things.
You're a Jill of
So
all trades.
I'm a Jill of all trades, as we say, and a
No one says that.
Jaster of none. I don't. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of mask for mask queer.
I was going to say, speaking of pan, actually, because
Oh,
I also identify as pan, but it's not something that people generally identify as in the very mask for mask gay community that I typically run in.
mm,
But I thought that was an interesting jumping off point to talk about Saltburn, which we're here to do.
yeah, exactly. Um, gut review. Did you like Saltburn?
I almost saw the movie in as like a triptych,
Sure.
and I think the first 2/3 of the movie worked very well, and the last third lost me.
Yeah, that seems to be based on my brief scanning of the Wikipedia page for Saltburn before this podcast episode, uh, common consensus.
I had never encountered a movie that I had heard such differing opinions about.
Really? I've only heard positive things for the most, or
I've
like
pretty much only heard negative things from critics, and every single person I know said, "Scott, you have to watch this movie. You're going to love it."
that's what I mean. Like the positive things I heard were not so much like it's high art or anything like that. More like it's a fun experience.
And I think it lived up to that.
I had a great time watching it. I thought it was fun.
Let's add a little backstory for it. So, have
Yeah,
you
and
ever
let's
heard of the
well,
director, Emerald Fennell?
can we just because this is episode 1, so we're figuring out podcasting on the fly here. Um, let's keep like a spoiler-free section as much as we can up top, and then we can like warn people that spoilers are coming.
Great, I love that.
Okay. Emerald
Fennell.
Fennell. I had not heard of her until I just scanned her Wikipedia page 10 minutes ago.
So,
But tell me
Emerald
about her.
Fennell is a director. Her first movie, I'm not sure it's actually her first movie, but her first breakout movie is called Promising Young Woman. And Promising Young Woman was my favorite movie of, I think it was 2 years ago now. She has a very clean aesthetic, a very clear vision, a very female centric idea, at least towards Promising Young Woman. And I think it's an ironic title for a new director who is breaking out the scene as a female director, which, as you see with the Oscars, is something that, you know, a lot of people are talking about female directors right now. And so a podcast I listened to called her the Promising Young Woman.
That's a great title.
So I was very excited for this Promising Young Woman second feature.
Mm-hmm.
I recognized her aesthetic again. I think she has a lot of beautiful shots. I think it's a very clear vision. But this was a left turn for her. There's some similarities in the way that the plot kind of devolves at the very end to something different than what the rest of the tone of the movie was. But other than that, I think it was a departure. And I think it is millennial fodder. I think she's very clearly a millennial voice of a director, sort of in the same vein as a who directed Girls.
I don't know
Blanking on
her
her
name.
name.
Yeah, whatever.
Her.
Yeah.
And I love her references. I think it was a interesting modern take on a lot of period pieces. It was a period piece, but it was like a 2006 period piece, which I want to talk about. And I thought the acting was good. I just think it lost me towards the end. And like we said, we'll keep this spoiler place, you know, without talking about the ending for a while. But Sarah, I would love to hear your experience of it.
Yeah, so I don't tend to do any reading or trailer watching or anything before I watch a movie. I don't like to know anything about them. Um, and I like from what I'd heard about this movie, I was really expecting just not that it wasn't gay by any means, it was very gay, but I was expecting more of like a I don't know, just kind of like a somewhat creepy gay love story. And this was not what I thought it would be. um, it was definitely a creepy gay love story, but I
But
didn't.
it was so much more than that.
It was much more than that. It was much more than I expected, and I like so what I'd heard. I guess the version of the plot that I'd heard going in, I knew like there was sort of a predator prey dynamic, but I didn't know which was which. Like, so when I was watching it, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, who's who? Like, is the movie trying to lead me to think one person is the good guy and one person is the bad guy? Is it going to reverse that on me? Um, so I was like trying to pick through that as I was watching it, but I had a lot of fun. I thought like it was an interesting movie where like none of the turns that were made were necessarily surprising to me in that they felt like the twist that would happen, you know?
I think that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. Like it's not a straightforward story, but it's also like very in line with sort of the conventions of telling a story like this. Um,
It almost feels like we have gotten
but
to peak twist in
yeah,
culture, and so twists are almost expected to the point where, like, no twist would have been
it would have been more shocking. But
more shocking, totally.
let's set up the movie a little bit more so we're not talking vaguely about a thing.
Yeah, yeah, why don't you give us a quick summary?
So it's 2006 and Oliver Quick, a scholarship student, or so we're told. I don't even know if that's ever actually confirmed. A scholarship student at Oxford is moving in, and like the big opening scene is you're following this guy Oliver as he's walking through Oxford campus on the day of like drop off. All the kids, all the new students are moving in, and you're definitely exposed to like a spectrum of Oxford types. At least the ones that he's keyed in on, like the conversations you hear are rich people. You hear like whiny rich British girls bitching each other out. You hear some kid going like, "Daddy, you forgot the," whatever he says. But it's just like all this kind of spoiled British kid stuff that you hear as he's moving in. Um, we're immediately introduced to the clique of the cool kids, and it's immediately clear that Oliver, our protagonist, is not of that clique. Um, yeah, and then he clearly falls like kind of love at first sight with this very hot dude who's the center of the cool kids, Felix. Um,
But we're told at the very beginning, sorry to interrupt. We're told at the
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
beginning that he's not in love with him. He loves him, but he's not in love with him. And this
Well,
theme comes back a few
does he say
times.
that at the beginning of the movie? I know he
Yes,
says it at the end.
there's a montage at the very beginning of the movie of different cuts of Felix, and Oliver's voice is saying, "I love him, but I'm not in love with him." And then that montage comes back at the end. And I'm
Okay,
curious, did you buy it?
yeah. So we'll talk about that. I think that's a spoiler section thing.
Great.
Um,
Bookmark it.
yeah. Uh, plot happens. Oliver ends up like kind of befriending Felix. Felix incorporates Oliver into the group of cool kids, even though the other cool kids are like, "This dude's weird and we don't like him." And Felix is like, "Be nice." And Felix learns more about Oscar's past. Oscar is from a troubled home. His parents struggle with addiction. His dad was a drug dealer. His dad ends up dying during their first year there at Oxford, and Oliver does not want to go back home, so Felix invites him back to his home, which is like a palatial estate in the British countryside called
That's
Saltburn.
sort of what I would call the first third of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It's like the college experience,
Hmm.
which I was having a lot of fun with. I love high school movies, I love college movies, and I think that there was a really interesting take on it, especially from this like class perspective of what it's like to come
Totally.
in, knowing a bunch of people, or like being a legacy student versus being someone who got there on merit. I thought that was an interesting tension that sort of set up the class dynamic that you get to once you get to the manor, which
Yeah.
is the name of the movie. And like that opening shot of the manor is sort of like, okay, this is a different movie than I thought it was for the first third, and now we're getting into a
Yeah.
part
We're
two.
cleanly in a new section to the extent that, like, and if you haven't seen the movie and you care about spoilers, we're going to inevitably have to start getting into some spoilery stuff here. We'll save like big spoilers, but starting to get into sort of Act 2 spoilers here. But I do want to keep talking about Act 1.
Yeah, I
But
have some
like
thoughts about Act One.
but such a clean division of parts to the extent that like one of the characters we're introduced to and spend a lot of time with in Act 1 is this like fellow friendless nerd, whose name I don't even know because once Oliver joins the cool kids, he has like one kind of look back at that guy, and we never see or hear of him again. Or he like sees him once in the library or something, and he's like, "Oliver, quick! He's going to get bored of you, you know," or whatever. And that's it. Like we don't hear from him again. Uh,
I know, kind of like a Chekhov's nerd.
Yeah, Chekhov's nerd does not return to the movie.
It didn't really bother me though. I think it is a
No, no,
pretty
it didn't
common.
bother me. I'm just pointing it out as
No,
like
for
a
sure. I think it's a
yeah,
common college experience. It's definitely happened to me where day one you have no idea what's going on, and so you just grab hold of whoever's next to you, whoever you
yeah,
can, and then over the course of an experience, you may think, maybe I want different friends, or maybe that's not the person who I want to spend my entire college experience with.
yeah.
So it
I mean,
didn't it didn't like ring any alarm bells to me, even though probably it should have, especially about Oliver. It didn't make me feel like Oliver was wrong or evil for doing that.
well, I mean, and the guy objectively sucked. Like, yeah,
Yes,
it's
his
not
his
like
his warning was felt, but it didn't really lead me to believe anything wrong about Oliver at the time.
yeah, no, totally.
There's
Um,
one scene in the first third that I want to talk about.
please.
Um, the tutoring scene I thought was really interesting.
Oh yeah.
Oliver's there on time, and then this other student walks in 20 minutes late, and the tutor, I suppose, is surprised that Oliver read the 50 texts that were on the reading list. And Oliver says, but they were on the reading list. I assume they had to. And I wrote this down. And the tutor says, the reading list is optional.
Yeah.
It's one of those unspoken rules about university, especially these elite universities, that you don't actually have to do the reading.
Yeah.
And the legacy student comes in and he just mentions his mom. And the tutor's like, oh, I admired your mom and we were in college together. And all of a sudden, he's the favorite, even though he walks in 20 minutes late. He did none of the reading. He just mentions that he's a legacy student. And all of a sudden, he curries the favor with the teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting scene. And that legacy character, Farley, um, is a major character for the rest of the movie. He is he is like a biracial, cool gay. Um, basically, like in 2006, he's strolling into this tutoring session with like glitter on his face and stuff. Like, I mean, in 2006, a different environment. Like, that's a confident guy in 2006, and
I agree. It did feel a little bit anachronistic to me.
it felt a little anachronistic. Yeah, it was like, okay, this feels a little Gen Z to me.
Do I say
Um,
that word wrong?
do you say anachronistic like
I say
Anna
it like a drag
Karenina?
queen name.
Yeah, you do. It's not.
Please welcome to the stage, anachronistic.
Anachronistic is a great drag queen name. For someone doing, yeah, no, anachronistic is how I've always heard it.
Great, I'll fix that.
Yeah, but if you ever want to try drag, I mean, I think you've got your
It's my
name.
drag name. It's done. We're here. I
Uh,
loved a lot of the scene setting in the first third in terms of
yeah,
the 2006-ness of it all. I heard Arcade Fire, I heard Cold War Kids, Block
hmm
Party. These were bands that were playing on my lime green iPod mini in that era. And
yeah,
it does such a good job of putting you in this. And that's sort of what I meant when I said that this is very clearly inspired as a period drama, but
right.
it's a recent history period drama. I think the story, the first thing I thought when they go to the manor is like, oh, is this Brideshead Revisited? Which I've never
Yeah,
actually read, but because we were Nerd Squad, I know too much about. It felt like a Jane Austen, an Evelyn Waugh, an E.M. Forster, like commoner gets picked up by
hmm
these upper class elites, and then you see the world of the upper class through the eyes of a commoner and how they have to navigate that world. So
and that's
that's what it
what
set up to me.
she wanted to do. Emerald Fennell, the writer director, or Fennell, uh, said she like specifically set out to make just another iteration of like the country manor story, and she specifically said it in 2006 because she thought that quote from the Wikipedia page, it's not like I actually did real research, but quote, really knocked the fucking glamour off things. um she thought that setting it in this like recent past did a lot to it's so recent that it's gross. Like we can't have that distancing of the past to just be like, ah yes, normal times. It's like, no, like these people are going from their jobs at as footmen at this fucking manor to like talking about Lost on Reddit. Um, yeah,
It does. I think I've seen this in a few. I've been noticing this in other media that 2000 to 2010 is this safe space. It's the Obama era, social media,
Yeah.
smartphones. They weren't so ubiquitous where you can get away with something like this.
I
And so
think
it's
it's all
almost like the latest year that you could set this without it being like, well, he would just been found out. You would have just seen his Instagram or whatever and like
yeah.
realized that he was lying.
I think that, and then I think also like if you said it too much later, like if you said it once Trump's president, once Brexit, like you can't have a movie like this. It would palpably not comment on the politics if it didn't touch it, and that's like not the story they wanted to tell. So yeah, I agree. This is like the last kind of era when you could do it.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that's worth note in our experience of this movie, a little backstory on us, and where we come from, because obviously everyone views media through their lenses. And while we do have the lens of queers watching it, we also have some other relevant lenses that will color our views. Scott and I both come from fairly upper middle class families in Texas and went to fancy private schools for middle school and high school where we knew like we weren't the Felixes of our lives. Spoiler alert, we were closer to the Olivers. Um, but we knew the Felixes of our social circles. Of course, like no one in Houston is really going to be to this extent. Like this is some shit you only get through like
This is some Lord
aristocracy.
aristocracy.
But and then we both attended fancy Ivy League schools where again we were like watching that Oxford scene. Like Oxford's a little different because it's an 800-year-old university and there's all this stuff around it, but like I went to Harvard, Scott went to Princeton, and definitely similar experiences. Like he
I had
makes that
flashbacks of freshman year
he
for
yeah.
sure.
At one point Oliver makes that comment about like all the boarding school kids, like they seem to already know each other or whatever. And like I had that total experience. So I was like, wow, these boarding school kids seem so much cooler and more mature
They
and
already knew how
worldly
to
than
navigate
me.
the social scene somehow.
Yeah, they knew how to navigate the social scene. They had friends. They felt like adults and made me feel like a kid.
Yeah, and their experience was different. And I think this maybe is a good setup for like part two of the movie. The leisure, like the summer experience, I think really does separate who is at the university. When you're at university, it's an equal playing field, and you can get ahead
Kind of, yeah.
on it's more equal, right? Like
Yeah.
you can get further ahead, if based on your field. I know plenty of people who I didn't even. There was a lot of people who I did not know in college who ended up with Rhodes scholarships or who ended
Yeah.
up with banking jobs that weren't even in my realm of vision. And it just showed me that like college is so much bigger than you think it is.
Yeah.
And there's a class of people who I was aware of and who I knew, but who I didn't really interact with that much because they weren't hustling as hard. They didn't need a job. And so they were there going to their summer estates in wherever in the summer. And that's appealing. I understand why Oliver wanted that lifestyle rather than the hustling lifestyle that he saw around him.
And I have questions about that we'll get into towards the end about how to interpret what Oliver wanted. Um, but I, yeah, like watching it, I was definitely having some flashbacks. Like it definitely gets like distorted through just the difference between an American and British like context because America has this veneer of like pervasive equality where even the rich kids there's like this kind of idea of like well if you're really rich it's like your dad or your grandpa made the money or something like even though it's not true like that's just the myth of the American dream and how it works is like yeah no one is like out of your reach even though they are but you're told they're not whereas in England that's not the case like there are lords still and there are commoners um but yeah, so he ends up getting in with Felix and telling this sob story about how hard his life was and his life sucks. And He's from this poor, addiction-rattled family, and um Felix is interesting because it's, like, really hard for me to separate out whether or not he is a good person or whether he's performing good person or whether there's even a difference. Um,
I'm obsessed with the term affluenza.
yeah.
Are you familiar?
Oh, yeah.
That's what he felt like to me.
Do you
He
wanna
felt like a
define it in
classic
case
case of
someone's not?
affluenza. Yes, it is a genuine legal term, which means that you are so rich that you literally don't know any better.
It's not a legal term,
It has
but
been used in legal defenses
it is
successfully.
it was introduced in a trial in defense of a Texas teen named Ethan Couch, who was driving drunk and killed 4 pedestrians, and, uh yeah, it was not a defense to the charge, it was a mitigation of the charge.
Okay, can I give a quick background on Sarah? Sarah is a law school dropout.
I'm a law school dropout, but I just
So
wanna
she
say
knows a lot more about this stuff than I do.
it's not a legal term, like, there's no lawyer going like, "Objection, your honor, affluenza." Um,
Okay, in my head, that's what was happening.
no. That I mean, what they were saying, they were using affluenza as because a lot of, like, the punishment being meted out in the American legal system has to do with, like, intent and, like, how responsible the person was in the sense that, like, could they genuinely have known better? Were there any things, like, altering their ability to make a judgment call here? And the
And
defense
he
was
was
saying,
too
like,
rich.
he was too rich and too disconnected and dissociated to really be able to make like, he just genuinely struggled to tell the difference between right and wrong and, like, have any understanding of the weight of reality.
And
Um,
that's sort of what Felix felt like to me. He
and
felt like he had it all, right? Like, and that's what
yeah,
attracted Oliver to him. He's tall, he's white, he's handsome. Every girl wants him.
yeah, he's hot as
Every
fuck.
boy wants him.
Yeah.
He is at Oxford. Like, he just has the charisma. He's the kind of person who shows you a bit of attention, and you feel like you're the only person on earth.
Yeah, no. I mean, the actor did a fantastic job with Felix. Like, yeah, really, he played that character really well. Like obviously the actor is really hot, which helps, but like the charisma is real, and he like genuinely feels nice, and you like him even while you're watching him like be served every minute of every day of his life and lounge naked in his family's like acreage of of whatever wheat fields. Uh Yeah, like, the actor pulls off being likable despite all these reasons that you, like, would be jealous of him or hate him or, like, if you have any sort of class analysis, understand that he's a parasite. Like
But I do think you're right. I think that the film sets up a dynamic that you're actually rooting for this relationship, this like unlikely buddy duo.
yeah.
You know something's gonna fall out from underneath it, but after the first third, when you're on the way to the manor, you're like, I kind of want this to work. I like these two people as friends.
I was rooting for them to end up together, for sure. And there's so much sexual tension presented between them, which I think it's presented that way because we're getting Oliver's perspective. Like, there's no
Mhm.
indication at any point in the movie that Felix is even bisexual. He fucks a lot of girls and expresses no explicit interest in men whatsoever.
Right.
Um,
But the world is set up a little bit without sexuality, like post-sexuality, in the sense like Felix mentions that Farley got kicked out of school for sucking off too many of the teachers. There's no mention of him being gay,
yeah,
right? There's no label. So maybe it's not post-sexuality, it's post-label.
and it's very. I mean, that's very much also like an aristocratic thing, though. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like, um, yeah,
Actually, I'm wrong. The mom says she was a lesbian for a while, so there
she
are
did say I
labels
was a
in there.
lesbian for a while, but even then, it's like I was a lesbian for a while. Like, there's no sense of it being an identity or it being any sort of
Yes.
like central structure to your life. It's just like a thing she done. Like life is fake, and they're all playing pretend, right?
Right. I think that that's a really good way to think about this middle of the
Yeah.
movie, this middle triptych. What do you call it? Middle
So
third.
yeah, let's just open up complete spoilers for Act Two. Then, um,
And by the way, the movie is not actually Act One, Act Two, Act Three. We have segmented it this way.
it's pretty explicitly Act One, Act Two, Act Three. I feel like there's like hard transitions. There's
Right.
Oxford.
I'm saying there's
There's
not like a black screen that says
right,
Act
right, right.
One.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Because the
Um,
first movie actually does that. Promising Young Woman
oh
has very
okay,
clear, I think it's
like
5.
theatrical breaks.
Yes, right. And so it like tells you it's a movie or like a play almost in that way.
I see.
But
Yeah,
let's start on Act Two. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience watching the manor unfold? Because that's a common trope of English literature is like Saltburn is the name of the movie. Saltburn is its own character, right?
yeah. Um, I mean, I was disgusted by it, to be honest. Like, I mean, I think we're supposed to be, and
Abolish billionaires.
yeah, I mean, that's all it made me feel. Like the movie, they're they're the kind of rich that doesn't make sense. Like it mind-bogglingly rich. Like there's a scene towards the end of the movie where um like Felix's dad, I don't even know his name, Sir James. Yeah, Sir James is offering a character like a blank check and is like, "How much money do you want?" And at that moment, I was like, there's no limit to what this guy could write. I feel like you could write any number on that check and it would not affect him at all. Because they just have they're so rich that money is meaningless. Um,
And
and
they
so
never
that's
tell you
growth.
where it comes from, right? It's very much this British aristocracy, like landed gentry, like no
Yeah, it
one
just
knows where
comes.
the money is.
Yeah, it's in all sorts of evil stuff. And that's to me where James, like, to put a moral judgment on James, which honestly the movie doesn't really ask us to do, but I'm doing. Um, because for me, like, I think there's an interesting question, and like as I mentioned earlier, like when James is taking pity on Oliver, when he's inviting this guy who's like frankly kind of weird and unlikable. Like you don't get the sense that sorry, Felix. You don't get the sense that Felix likes Oliver really. Like Felix finds Oliver interesting and he's constantly referred to by other characters as latest plaything, whatever. Like this is a habit Felix has. He's just fascinated by people who have real lives, to quote
The whole
his
family does,
sister.
right?
Yeah.
There's that other character played by Carrie Mulligan who sort of I like showcases that this is something that Felix maybe has learned from his family.
Yeah, it's what they do, totally. Um and yeah, like on the one hand, I'm tempted to be like, well, does it mean Felix is good? Does it mean he's bad? Like Felix isn't good. Felix is bad. Felix is happily a beneficiary of this ancestral wealth. And if Felix were trying to be good or cared about being good, he'd be doing something with that money.
I think
Um,
that the part that I turned on Felix was when he was showing around Oliver
yeah,
around the mansion. There's 2 lines that I wrote down. One
the
was
Rubens, frankly,
uh,
dreadful Rubens.
some
What
fucking hideous Rubens.
fucking hideous Rubens. Oh my god.
I love that.
Yeah,
And the other one is I accidentally fingered my cousin here.
yeah. Um, great lines.
It sets up these 2 dynamics of like, yes, this person's educated, but he's like an asshole about it. And also, he's like, this is a weird incestuous sexual family, which you get a lot more of later.
And look, someone accidentally fingering their cousin, like the act itself is one thing. It's casually telling another person that you did that. That to me is like a whole nother thing.
It's a throwaway line, right?
It's a throwaway line. Like to him, it's like, oh, nothing I do matters. Like,
Yes.
and I can say literally anything to you and it won't affect how you think of me. Like,
Yes, it's almost like the decorum of school where we're around our peers and we like people our own age can judge each other for any kind of reason. Like that's out the window. I'm at home and I am the king of this place and I can do whatever I want here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a wild scene. And then later, like, as Oliver is going to meet Felix's family for the first time, he overhears Felix's mom, played by Rosamund Pike, excitedly sharing all the fucking gossip about Oliver. Like, and he stuck his fingers down his mother's throat. No, it's like all of this gossip. And like, yeah, these people, like, the movie in one sense is about Oliver as Parasite, but like these aristocrats are just as parasitic, and not even in the sense that they're obviously parasites of like being rich and having ancestral money. Like that's parasitic, but they're parasites of meaning. They have no struggle. The affluenza is the right word. Like these people, these are people whose lives have absolutely no struggle.
They have
They have
no
never had
raison d'être.
they have nothing. Like, they have nothing to work towards, there's no struggle, there's nothing to overcome, there's, like, nothing to provide any meaning to their life, and in order to fill that void, they bring in these commoners, and they just, like, suck them for all their meaning, and then they let them go. Like, that, uh I don't know remember if that woman's name was Carrie, um,
Carey
Rosamund
Mulligan's the
Pike's.
actress
Oh,
who
Carrie Mulligan.
plays the main character in Promising Young Woman.
Gotcha.
So it's funny because she's a huge actress. She's nominated for Best Actress this year at the Oscars, and she played a very bit role to prove a little bit of a point, I think.
Yeah. And she plays this character who, like, Rosamund Pike's character refers to as like, she's so stylish, and I thought she would be interesting. It turns out she's boring, and she's like got real problems. She's got like addiction issues. They end up kicking her out of the house before she's really found a place to settle. But they don't care because they're bored of her now. And then later, as like a throwaway, we find out she died, and they were like, "Oh yeah, she died." Anyway, um, like they were not real friends. They did not care about her. They were just there to absorb like a real human story from her and live vicariously a real life through her. Uh,
Right.
yeah,
I think that the montage of them just drinking champagne and playing tennis in tuxedos and ball gowns
yeah,
just is further proof that these people have nothing to live for. Gossip is fun for them, and they
yeah,
get it by bringing in outsiders and letting them in for a little while, as long as the gossip is fun and having something to talk about and something to do. But then they're gone as soon as they're no longer useful to them.
yeah. And I think that's real. I mean, I think to an extent it's exaggerated because these people are so rich. But I think we all, at least not all, I think a lot of us in the modern day, especially in like wealthy Western countries, especially if you're from middle to upper class, like we experience this. Like to an extent, that's what watching movies is. We too, we might not live in an ancestral estate being waited on by an army of servants, but a lot of the struggle of life has been removed for us as well. Like we live in this age of modern technology where life is not as hard as it used to be. It's hard for a lot of reasons now that like it's hard because of capitalism and like trying to fit into these massive systems, and it's hard because we live in an increasingly fascistic police state, etc. But like the daily struggle of life, the procuring food, the whatever, like that stuff's all been commodified and simplified and packaged for us. And now like I feel like watching television, watching movies, watching a movie like Saltburn, we are doing what these aristocrats are doing. We are
We exist to
sapping.
be entertained.
Yeah, we want to be entertained by Oliver just as much as they do. It's why we're watching the movie. We're sapping meaning off of these characters' lives and their struggles because I don't have anything else to do while I'm like lounging in my bed on my laptop on a Friday night
Ordering DoorDash, yeah.
ordering DoorDash. Um,
No,
Yeah,
there's been a bent towards this motif of like eat the rich. We are living in a French pre-revolution era of further class struggle, the 0.1% and all that. And so these movies have come out recently, Triangle of Sadness, The Menu, which is really about
I love the Triangle of
making
Sadness.
fun of. I didn't watch it. I need to watch it. Making fun of these extreme rich people.
Yeah,
And this movie has a bent of that as well. Some of the customs in particular that come through to differentiate the classes that read as period pieces when you're reading them in Pride and Prejudice or in Edith Wharton come across as parody. Things
yeah,
like the food scenes,
mhm, mhm.
which is a very classic
Yeah, yeah. When
classic class differentiator in these kind of period pieces, and also the clothing. There's a lot of talk about oh, that's a rental tux, like you're almost passing, or like we dress up for dinner, like I'll loan you a dinner jacket. Like, yeah, he brought one suitcase, of course he didn't bring a dinner jacket.
yeah, that line was very funny, and it's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, like that first night, Oliver's in the mansion. Felix says like, "Oh, you can borrow one of my jackets. It's we dress for dinner. It's black tie." They do that every night. And when you are like when you're watching a Jane Austen movie or something, and they do that, they're
Hmm.
fucking dressed to the nines for every meal where they're served at a banquet table, and you just don't think about it in the same way because
No, you're
when
like,
it's
yes, costume design team,
yeah, and
work those muscles.
when it's 2006, and then you're like, wait, what the fuck are they doing? um, yeah, they're just like carrying on this performance for whom? For no one really.
Yeah, it's
It's
very much a Truman Show moment. It's like, who's watching you? Why are you doing this?
yeah. Why are you doing this? And then like the breakfast scene where they're like breakfast is on the side, and he's like, oh okay, and then the
But not the
butler's
eggs.
like, how would you like your eggs? And he's like, well, I thought it was on the side, and he's like, not the eggs. I'm like, yeah, just like
I love
totally
that.
arbitrary social rituals really drawn into stark contrast. Um, okay, we can't talk any more about Act Two without talking about the scene, Scott.
Okay, there's two the scenes.
In Act Two, okay,
Well,
we
no,
might have
there's
a
one
different
the scene
line
in
of
Act Two and one the scene in Act Three.
yeah. I'm talking about the
Okay, let's
Act
talk about
Two
the scene in Act
the
Two.
scene. Do you want to describe it for us?
So Felix is taking a bath.
They share a
Oliver,
bathroom.
they share a bathroom, yes. Oliver hears some noises coming from the bathtub. He peeks in and sees Felix jerking off and watches to completion. And then Felix gets out of the bathtub and it's draining and he's leaving the bathroom. And Oliver gets into the bathtub as it's almost drained. And we see a very close up of the drain of the water and whatever else is in there flowing out. And Oliver starts licking it up,
Yeah,
just
he
getting what.
starts licking it, and then he just like full on just sucking, drinking every last drop out of that drain, licking out of the drain. Like
I don't even take baths. Bath water like grosses me out. You're like
so
you're supposed to
gross.
get clean, but like where is the grime going? It's just sitting in the substance around you, isn't it?
I don't think you take baths to get clean. I think you take baths to relax, like a hot tub. Um,
Oh, well,
no,
I've
I
been
mean,
doing that wrong.
in my mind, like you can take a bath to get clean, but yeah, you're sitting in a soup of your own grime.
But that visceral scene of
Yeah, it's
Oliver just like
long
sucking
too.
up the water and hair and dirt and cum and all of that. It's just like, oh man, this guy will do anything. It's sort of like the first scene where you really realize the extent to which this guy will go to be
Yeah,
close to Felix.
yeah, like you have a sense of it, and then that's the scene where you're like, okay, this guy is a little more insane than I thought.
It also is
Uh,
the first scene that you're like, where is this movie gonna take me?
yeah, and the first scene where you're maybe a little worried for Felix.
Hmm. Yeah,
You're like, oh,
very like Fatal Attraction.
I was kind of hoping Felix would like catch him. Oliver's like not being sneaky about it. Like, there's nothing stopping Felix from, like, "Oh, I forgot my phone," and walking back into the bathroom.
You know, you
Um,
said earlier that Felix shows no signs of being homosexual or anything but straight, and I sort of disagree with you. I think that I think he knows that Oliver is attracted to him, and there's something that, as a gay man, there's something that happens with straight men who you show attention to. I think that the heteronormativity of straight culture is that men show interest in women and
mm,
not the other way around. They're always the pursuer, not the person being pursued. And so when a gay man shows attention to a straight man who knows he's hot and who works out, that straight man, there's a brain chemistry thing of like, oh, I did want that attention, and thank you for noticing the hard work I've been putting into the gym. So I
oh,
do think there's an
100%.
attraction there that
I
I'm
think
not sure if Felix saw Oliver sucking up his bathwater, it would even necessarily be a bad thing.
I think it would be no, I don't think if he saw him, Felix would be like, "You're disgusting, get out of my house." But I do think it would raise Felix's, like, kind of alert levels a little bit.
That's fair. It's almost like this is an unspoken thing. Like you can look, but you can't touch. I like you as an admirer, but I don't want you to get too
Well,
close.
that's also just gross, like, even if I were like, I could be in the most loving, sexually open, committed relationship with a person, and if I caught them secretly sucking up my bath splooge, I would be concerned for them. Like, that's what I mean. Like,
I could see like a dom sub relationship,
I
but
could
you
see it being a thing as, like,
if it's consensual.
part of an act of, like, degradation play or
Yes,
whatever.
right.
Totally. And, like, obviously, men pay a lot of money for hot e-girl bathwater now for whatever reason. So there's something about that, and I don't know if they're drinking it or what. Um,
Did you hear that there's a Jacob Elordi candle now?
sure.
It's
Uh,
bathtub scented.
oh my god, that's hilarious. Uh, when I say he's not gay, I mean there's a lot of yearning tension, and I totally agree with you. I think Felix is aware of Oliver's interest and enjoys it. I just mean that, like, Felix himself, despite the yearning looks or despite maybe even inviting that sort of, like, being a little seductive and enjoying being a little seductive, like, Felix if Felix wanted to be fucking dudes, he could. Like,
For sure.
there's nothing in this culture that would matter. Like, Felix has a ton of sex in the movie, and he's just always fucking girls. Like, that's what I mean. Like, I think he enjoys the attention, but, like, it's not like we ever
He's
have a
straight.
scene where Felix goes and fucks a dude at a party. He's always fucking women. Um, yeah, I just think he's straight. I don't think he's dumb. I think he's aware of Oliver's interest.
The first two thirds remind me kind of the setup of Call Me by Your Name,
Which I haven't seen.
where it's a younger, smaller man pursuing this much bigger, older man with a lot more like money and attention and whatever. And it there who is ostensibly straight, and then there's this kind of weird tension, and then they consummate it, and then it
Mm,
becomes love. And it's sort of like about two thirds into the movie. And it sort of feels like that same setup where it could
yeah,
happen. You could see Felix being that sort of like, okay, I'm gonna give in because you've given me enough attention, or because I actually am
yeah. I
bisexual
kept
or pansexual,
expecting
whatever.
him to, and
Right, it seems
the
like it
movie
could have
invites you
happened.
to. Yeah,
Exactly. It's the will they, won't they, and
yeah,
then maybe this is a good time to get into the third act of the movie, which I believe starts with this, like, Bacchanalia, Midsummer Night's Dream party
they're all
that
in
the whole
fancy dress.
family is throwing for
Yeah,
Oliver's birthday, very weirdly, where, um, this will they, won't they comes to a head.
yeah, yeah, they're all in fancy dress, which is apparently British for a costume party, and, um, I think very, very intentionally and not subtly, like, Felix is wearing angel wings, and Oliver has
Devil
they're
horns.
antlers, but they're devil horns, like, it's very angel demon vibes, um, and yeah, they're at this party. Well, before this bacchanal, something very important happens in the story, which is that Felix kind of surprise takes Oliver on a trip back to his
Oh, I
home
forgot about that. You're so
for
right.
Oliver's birthday. And Felix is like, "No, this will be good. Your mom needs to see you." And Oliver's like, "Please, I don't want to go there. You don't understand. That's such a painful place for me." And then they go, and Oliver, it turns out, is not from a poor drug dealing house of addiction. He's from a nice upper middle class home with lovely, perfectly lovely parents. He has two sisters.
He's been
Uh,
lying about everything.
he's been lying about absolutely everything, and like the life he comes from is like the lives that Scott and I came from. Like that is our social class of like nice house, nice neighborhood, loving
Suburbs,
parents.
normal
Uh,
4 or 5 person family, parents are still together.
yeah, like not like rich, not Felix rich, but like solidly not a struggle. Um,
My dad's
totally
not
fine
dealing
life.
drugs. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and that's what I mean. Like, we don't even ever, he's called a scholarship kid. People assume he's a scholarship kid because he's not like rich, but there's no indication actually explicit that he's a scholarship kid. And it looks like his parents could afford to send him to Oxford. So
Yeah, when
yeah.
I got to Princeton, I dressed like that.
Yeah, I just like that too. I was just a nerd with no style.
I didn't
Uh,
know that I needed a barber jacket to fit in.
yeah, whatever. Like, who knows that shit? Only the boarding school kids.
Right, exactly.
Um, and yeah, and it's like a weird moment, and we never see them again. Like, they don't come back into play, and we don't really ever see why Oliver is so like. Why does he hate this life so much? We don't know. Um, but anyway,
Yeah, I wanted to come back to that. I want to theorize on that at the end.
yeah. So Felix realizes Oliver has been lying about everything, which to me would be, if nothing else so far has been a fucking red flag, I would be like, actually, I'm not bringing you back to my house to be around my parents and my sister because what the fuck?
I think that's a good point. Why didn't he
Yeah,
leave him at home?
yeah. And instead, he's like, we'll come
I
back.
guess you can come back for your birthday, but then you have to leave tomorrow.
Yeah, you can come back for your birthday party because we already organized it. Even
Yeah.
though it doesn't matter that he's there because when they sing him happy birthday, no
They
one
don't know
knows
his
his
name.
name. They could have had this birthday party for nobody and it
For
would have
no
made
one.
no difference. Uh, but he brings Oliver back into his home and it ends up being a crucial mistake. So
I
yes,
did
there
love the party scene.
it was great. Yeah, really well. I mean, the whole movie is like beautifully filmed and shot and looks
It's
great, and it's all
sumptuous.
it's all
It's
super aesthetic.
rich. Yeah.
Um, it's
I thought
aesthetic
the
with tildes between every letter.
Yeah, I love mazes. I love a hedge maze. I love in Goblet of Fire
Yeah,
all the stuff that happens in the
and they're
maze.
all reading Harry Potter throughout
I yeah,
the
yeah,
movie.
that's true. Like very 2006.
Yeah, yeah. So like this kind of this big Felix and Oliver's big confrontation comes to a head in the middle of the family's labyrinth, complete with Minotaur statue.
While
Um,
Felix is fucking a random girl.
while Felix is fucking a random girl at the Minotaur statue. And the idea of mazes has been woven throughout the movie. It's one of the many themes. Like one of the things Oliver says at the beginning is like, he says, "You can leave Saltburn," you know, like I shouldn't have believed him or whatever. Like the family has a little model of the labyrinth that we see Oliver playing with at some point, and then the butler is like, "Don't fucking touch that," in polite butler speak. So, what do you think is about these mazes? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think maze is a pretty obvious motif if you if you ask me, like a
Yeah.
common one in like Inception, for example. But this idea of like getting lost in order to find your way out,
Hmm.
but these mazes, the goal is to get to the center,
Hmm.
not to find a way out and to get stuck there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference of this type of maze. and it sort of portends what's going to happen at the end.
Totally. And I think to get um because the movie is so explicit about it's a labyrinth and there's a minotaur statue in the middle of it, I'll dip into my pretentious classics background. And like the movie is asking us to think about Theseus and the Minotaur and what does that mean and what is that myth? And Theseus and the Minotaur, the labyrinth is built to hold the Minotaur, who is a prince. I mean, the Minotaur is the son of Pasiphae, queen of Crete, and they build this labyrinth to trap the Minotaur there because he's like whatever, the horror. And obviously Felix is not a Minotaur in the sense that he's trapped. But Felix is trapped in just this maze of aristocracy. And the Minotaur is also cannibalistic. And the Athenians, who are the vassals of Crete at the time of the myth, have to constantly send 7 maidens and 7 young men each year to be fed to the Minotaur to keep it like appeased. Like it subsists on devouring the lives of these other youths. And that is sort of what Felix and his family do. Like they are cannibals of meaning. And every year, Felix does bring back another offering to the labyrinth that is Saltburn for his family to feast on.
I
Um,
love that reading.
yeah, thank you. Just came up with it. And it's like we get this moment where Oliver says like, you know, these people have no natural predators. Like they're the apex predator and they've already succeeded. Like these are the descendants of the past's apex predators. Like I think that's kind of interesting. Like uh these people's ancestors were the fucking Olivers. Like the conniving, manipulative deceivers willing to prey upon anybody to get to the top. Like that's how you become an aristocratic family. But now their descendants have become so fat and felt so safe that they don't realize they've let this like predator into their nest, into the
Mm.
center of their labyrinth. And so instead of Felix now being the Minotaur, he's not ferocious anymore. Like they've lost whatever that was. All he can do is like fuck some girl on the Minotaur statue. Um, and
So does that make Oliver Theseus?
I think kind of, yeah. But there's
And
like
can you
no
extend the metaphor? What happens to
I mean,
Theseus?
I don't think you need to extend it too far. Like Theseus is Prince of Athens, and he's like, I'm gonna end the domination of Crete and the terror of the Minotaur. Send me instead. I'll sacrifice myself. I'll go into the labyrinth and I'll slay the monster. And like that, Oliver's story is sort of a distorted reflection of that story. It is he is quote unquote the commoner, and we find out later very actively and voluntarily submitted himself to this labyrinth and ends up slaying the prince. He ends up slaying Felix in the center of the labyrinth. So he's like kind of Theseus, except he's not doing it for any sort of noble reason.
Mm.
He's not trying to save Ariadne. He's just there. uh,
I
and
am
that,
curious. I have two questions at the end, and one of them is around Oliver's motivation. But
yeah.
let's finish the plot synopsis. And I think this is a good point to say. Definitely spoilers.
Oh yeah, full spoilers for the movie. Yeah, so they have like this confrontation. Oliver's like, I love you, whatever. And Felix is like, you make my blood run cold. Um, and Oliver vomits. He's drunk. He wakes up super hungover or whatever. And everyone's screaming. Felix is missing. They can't find him anywhere. Everyone, like even the rich nobles now are like they've abandoned all the pretense. Like they're digging through the muck along with the servants trying to find their precious little boy. And where is he, Scott?
He's dead,
He's dead in the center of the labyrinth,
right where we left him.
right where we left him. And yeah, it turns out that Oliver's protestations of love or whatever in the middle of the labyrinth were a ruse. He'd already committed himself to murdering Felix. He'd already filled that champagne bottle full of drugs.
We don't know that at this point,
We
though.
don't know it at the time. No.
The next scene I found really
Yeah.
good when they're having
So
breakfast.
Felix, yeah, so Felix is dead of an apparent overdose. Um,
Mhm.
it's not like a clear murder or anything. But I also there's a really interesting like it's a really interesting moment in the movie before the breakfast scene because during the search, like throughout the movie, Oliver's kind of talking. It feels like to you. Um, we find out later he's talking to Rosamund Pike, but there's this interlude where Oliver's like you already know what happened. Do I really have to tell you? Like, you know, Felix. He's basically saying, like, look, you know, Felix is dead. You know, I killed him. Like, at this point, you know that's what happened. And he's like, you're slowly turning the handle on the Jack in the Box. And that's
This is all
really,
voiceover, you're saying?
it's voiceover that Oliver is talking to you, the audience, while you're watching this happen.
It never clicked that it's actual that the voiceover is all him talking to Rosamund Pike.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, got it.
It's all him talking to Rosamund. I think it is. But I
No,
mean, like that,
I see what you're saying. I believe you.
but that line is to us, the audience,
Mhm, mhm.
where he's like, "Yeah, you're just enjoying the tension of this moment, like when you're turning a Jack in the Box. Like what's pleasurable is the tension of not knowing exactly when, like the shock is going to hit you, but you know it's coming." Um, I just enjoyed that as like a meta commentary on the experience of watching this movie. It's very much a Jack in the Box. Uh,
Yeah, you know something's coming, but you don't quite know what it is.
yeah. Anyway, tell me about
And
the
and
breakfast
then it
scene.
folds out kind of like what you expect it to. But
Yeah.
so the breakfast scene, breakfast after the murder, is business as usual, except it's obviously not. Felix
Obviously,
isn't
it's not.
there,
Yeah.
but the parents want to do anything not to think about the fact that their son just died.
Yeah.
The daughter is pouring wine, overflowing her glass and chugging it. Um, Farley is crying and doesn't really know what to do.
Farley is
And
the cool gay kid who turned out
mhm.
we've kind of dropped him as a plot point. He is interesting. Um,
We also kind of drop Valencia as a plot point.
yeah,
She's
well,
sort of
we
interesting.
can talk about both of those characters, but
So Oliver is the only one who's willing to go with the ruse that the parents are going with, that everything's fine, that they're just talking about small talk, which is a very aristocratic thing, right? Like we don't
yeah,
talk about our problems, we just talk about whatever we can not to talk about our feelings. And all the while, the butler's like, the coroner's coming to bring your son. Do you want me to close the windows? And
yeah,
then they do, and it's just red.
yeah,
The
just
sun through
right.
the windows is just red.
And you hear the squeaky wheels of the coroner's cart as you know they're wheeling Felix's body past them. It's an amazing scene, really.
I loved
Um,
it. And then
and
I had a question about actually something that happened in the movie.
yeah,
Farley starts to blame Oliver, but then Oliver basically accuses Farley of something, but it wasn't really clear to me what he accused him of. And Farley gets up and runs basically and is like, I guess I can never come back here.
well, okay, so I think they know that James died of an overdose. Like, I'm guessing they know that even though it's not told to the audience explicitly.
Who
And
you mean Felix?
sorry, that Felix died of an overdose. Um, and Farley like stands up as the coroner's cart's rolling past. Farley gets overwhelmed by the emotion of it and the just the absurdity of this moment. And he stands up and he's like, "I have to go. Like, I have genuine feelings. I'm mourning my cousin. This is insane." And Sir James, Felix's dad, is like, "Sit down and eat your pie." He's like, "We don't." So
Yeah.
Farley is like half American, and he spent a good part of his youth growing up in America. And Sir James is like, "We don't want your. We all have feelings. We don't want your American feelings here." It's like what we have to do right now is pretend everything is fine. uh, keep calm, carry on, or whatever the fuck. Uh, so I think Farley and Valencia, I think both know that it was Oliver, kind of. They intuitively know, like, Oliver's not right. They can
Right. They can't
intuitively
prove it, but
sense.
they know something's wrong here.
Yeah, they know something's wrong. They know that the way he's acting is wrong. Like, he's clearly not like, he's able to kind of coldly observe the situation, analyze what the parents need from him to, like, best slide into the position, and he's doing it. And I think when they both observe him able to be such like an effective operator in the middle of this moment, they both realize
It's like
like,
something clicks.
and also they've both had these, we haven't mentioned them, they've both had these experiences with Oliver of like sexual domination and manipulation, where
He's playing
Oliver,
psychosexual games with both of them.
yeah, he's playing psychosexual games with both of them, and they both know that he's not like the meek, innocent little lamb that he portrays himself as. So they both know like this dude's fucking fake.
Mhm.
So I think in that moment, Felix Farley knows that like, okay, something is wrong here with Oliver, but Oliver is very calmly able to say like, basically implied he died of an overdose, and who was the one who was doling out drugs last night? Farley.
I see.
Yeah. So
So he
he accuses
implies to James that
Farley. Yeah.
Farley is the reason for the death. Got
Yes.
it. Okay.
And then Farley like doesn't know what to say about that because it's, and then James is like search his room and they will find drugs because Farley was doing a lot of drugs and handing out a lot of drugs.
Got
Um
it.
yeah, and
That makes
I
sense now.
Farley realizes like he's been out parasited. He's lost the
Mhm.
game, and
Mhm.
Farley is the only one to survive this. And I think it's because he realizes that he's lost and he leaves.
Well, it's a good point that he was one of the parasites. He wasn't one of the like he was always asking for money, right? Like he
Yeah,
was playing the same game as Oliver. He
yeah,
recognized that he got beat at the game, whereas
right.
the rest of the family was never playing the game.
Yeah, they weren't playing that game. Yeah, so I
So
think that,
so at this point, the movie devolves
yeah,
for me, at least. I think it
it starts moving really fast here.
yes, it gets to the point. I paused it and I was like, "There's not that much movie left," but the deaths come very quickly,
Yeah,
and it sort of descends into madness. There's some quick scenes of some people dying.
mhm.
Uh, then at the graves, um, my question for you is: would you choose Times New Roman as a
N
font for your
obviously not.
gravestone?
Horrendous choice. Mom, dad, if you're listening and you end up controlling my gravestone someday, no Times New Roman. Um,
I knew you would have thoughts about that.
yeah. No, I so Valencia is like taking a bath. I think in Felix's and Oliver's bathroom, maybe. Yeah, she's taking a bath, and Oliver comes in, and they have this like confrontation. It's a really, I think it's a powerful monologue that she has here that she delivers about him. And she basically tells Oliver to his face, like, "I know it was you. I know, like, you did this. You're this disgusting, awful person. You're this parasite. You've just come here and you've devoured Felix. Congratulations, you did it. You ate him." Um, and
Yeah, you're a moth.
she calls him a moth, and and then he like tries to do the psychosexual domination thing, and he like starts making out with her, and she for a second gives in part because she's very drunk and she's very sad, and like her instinct is, I think her training is lean into any like physical distraction that will let me escape the pain of this moment or the pain of being real. And but she's able to resist that, and she pulls back, and uh long story short, Oliver kills her and fakes her suicide um in the bathtub. And yeah, and then it's kind of interesting from there because I just thought he would kill James. Like, next we see James talking to Oliver. And at first I was like, is this James telling Oliver that he's now the new beneficiary of the will because they've lost their kids and he's the only one left? But James actually is like, oh, actually, I recognize that you're this evil parasite and you're terrible for my wife and you're a leech and you have to leave. And we get this like blank check moment. And I were you surprised that Oliver accepted a payout?
I don't think it was explicit.
Well, he left.
I wasn't surprised because money seems like the only thing that the only logical reason that he would be there in the first place.
And that's, I think, where we might disagree.
Well, I
Um,
think the movie proved, like, there's still 15 minutes left of the movie. That's It was unsurprising to me, and yet it shouldn't have been. Or like it should have been. It should have been a red flag that like he's not done yet. There was more here going on. And I'm still not sure what the motivation was entirely, but money clearly wasn't the end goal.
yeah, he seems to have taken a payout, and now he lives. And he leaves the house. All the servants. There's like this. He's sent out through like the servants' exit, not through the main door. Uh, and so he leaves in amidst all the different servants out there smoking,
So many
and
of them.
so many of them smoking, and they hate this guy because they know who he is. They know what this game is. And like I think that's a really powerful moment because it's we know the servants are just humans. Like we know that having servants is appalling and horrendous and etc. But over the course of the movie, when you're just living with these rich people, you like it lulls you in again and you start to not see them. Like they become set pieces again as they are in these people's lives. And then this moment where you're like, oh yeah, all these other human beings who are no different than these other human beings. Um,
Totally. He's
and
been cast out to it's a very classist moment to show you
yeah, yeah,
where
he's
Oliver
rejoined
is now. Yeah.
rejoined his proper class.
So before we get to the very end, you sent me a text while you were watching it.
Oh yeah, that is the second scene.
Scott, he's fucking the grave.
Yes. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I breezed past that. They bury Felix. Everyone leaves. They go to do the stone ritual, and this is where I think James like demonstrates for the first clear time that he knows exactly what Oliver is. Like he's familiar at least with this kind of person. He's an experienced rich person. He knows parasites when they happen. And he's just generally not scared of them, but he's like not fooled by Oliver. And you know that when he tells Oliver, like, we'll see you back at the house while we go do our family ritual of throwing the stone. This like meaningful tradition for us. You're not a part of that. Um, and while everyone else is gone doing this stone throwing ritual, there's no other way to describe it. Oliver fucks Felix's grave, his fresh grave. Um,
He lays down in it first, and it feels like that's kind of going to be the end of it. But then you're
no,
like,
I knew he
wait,
was gonna fuck it from the beginning.
he starts taking off his clothes, and then
As soon as it was Oliver and the grave alone, I was like, he's going to fuck the grave. And then you watch in horror as it slowly unfolds.
I've had multiple friends be like, I need to talk to you about a scene in this movie. And I genuinely don't know if it's going to be the bathtub scene or the pool scene.
Yeah, which scene is it? It's one of the scenes.
I could see both of them for me.
Yeah, Willa told me like Willa watched it with one of her partners. My girlfriend Willa watched it with one of her other partners, and she was like, there was one scene that I had to leave the room. I couldn't watch it. Like it caused me such like cringe.
Which one was
Uh,
it?
I don't know.
Oh,
She was like, "You'll know it when you see it," and I'm like, "It's one of these two.
there's multiple.
It could be either one. Is it the
Mhm.
cum sucking scene or is it the grave fucking scene?" And I don't know. Um,
I will give it to Emerald. Those are two kind of like stay with you kind of scenes. And I
oh,
think
I think it's a
horror movies
good
try to do that in a way that like they can't achieve this level of depravity.
yeah. No, this was like the kind of idea that might pop into your head and then be like, can't actually do that,
Yeah, and I
and
think
then
you
they
see it a
actually
lot from
do it. Uh,
there's like Japanese directors who will go that far, like Korean
yeah,
directors who will go that far. I love that it's coming from like a 20, 30 something year old woman.
yeah. So yeah, he fucks the grave. It's meaningful, I guess. Like, it's like this moment of he's also crying and he's hugging the grave. And it's kind of interesting because like there's no one watching him. We're watching him and he's watching himself. But it's like, what is the performance for? Is he performing? Like, why is he crying? he's the one who murdered him. Like, what's he crying over? And there's a lot going on in this scene. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of like the last bit of authenticity.
yeah,
I think that the so much of this was a play that he was manipulating people, and that again, I think we get to the motivations at the very end, maybe, but clearly one of the motivations was actually love. Like he was being honest at the
or at
first part.
least sex.
Right, like he was attracted to Felix, and
Yeah,
there was actual love or lust or or
something.
jealousy. Something was authentically there for him to go
Yeah.
through with all of this.
And that what you just said reminded me of the part of the monologue that Valencia gives when she dies, her like pre-death monologue at Oliver. That's interesting, where she's like, my dad calls you Spider-Man. My dad thinks you're this dangerous spider, always lurking and weaving webs. But I don't think so. I think you're a harmless little moth. You fucking moth, man. And then he kills her. So it's like, yeah, you were wrong, actually, Valencia. Your dad was correct. um, yeah.
But you're right. It's interesting that the dad knew, but it almost goes back to like the mom and the dad want this kind of they
Well,
they
but the dad
they
kicks
open
him out. The
but they
dad
open their
saves them.
doors to these sorts of
They do.
people.
Right. And, Oliver describes them all as sleeping belly up because they don't realize that there's any predators left. Except that James does. Like, James, he does it too late. He's already lost both of his kids, but he does successfully get Oliver out of the house somehow. And it's not explicit if it's a payout or if it's, physically enforced. We don't know.
So then James, like
James
sometimes,
dies.
sometimes goes by. James dies,
It's
natural causes.
COVID. They're wearing a mask, so it's been 14 years. 14, 15 years. Um, yeah, so James, in the way Rosamund Pike says, like, I'm surprised he waited this long, suggests it was suicide to me.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah,
but
it's not really clear how he
it's
dies,
not
but
clear. We could probably go back
we
and
know
pause
time
and
has
read the
passed. Right.
newspaper article, but we're not going to because we're not professionals. Um, yeah, but like for 14 years, James protected them from Oliver, and Oliver recognized James as like, okay, James knows me well enough and
Right.
has
I
the
can't beat
resources.
him.
I'm not going to beat James. Um, so even though like I half expected him just to fucking murder James in that office during that scene, but now that James is out of the picture, Rosamund Pike is fair play. So a classic scene. Rosamund Pike's at some coffee shop, and oh wow, who else is at this coffee shop? It's Oliver. Funny. I wonder how he knew she'd be there. Definitely an accident. Um, and she's alone, and she's sad, and she's lost everyone in her life, and so she invites Oliver back in because he's like a thing. That makes her, I don't know, like continue to be able to feign that normalcy or like whatever performance she enjoys of
Or remind her of her
a
kids, or
reminder of her kids and that like a reminder of a nicer time. Um, and we don't know what happens. Immediately we're told, well, she fell ill and I was her caretaker. Like obviously Oliver poisoned her and was her caretaker. And then it's revealed, to my understanding, that all of the narration of the story from Oliver throughout the movie was Oliver telling Rosamund Pike, now fully intubated and
on her
IV'd up
deathbed,
on her deathbed.
already
Like,
having signed over the rights to the estate to Oliver.
yeah, Oliver's a beneficiary, and Oliver gets this moment, his evil villain uh, monologue moment, where he explains to Rosamund Pike exactly what he did. And turns out, like, it wasn't an accident with a bicycle that led him to meet Felix in the beginning. He fucking planned it all from this very start. Um, there was some that was revealed that I thought was silly. Like, it's like, ooh, and we revealed that he's the one who sent the email about the pottery from Farley's phone, which was like a drama thing that got Farley kicked out once. And it's like, oh, I thought we assumed that. Like, I thought we knew that. You didn't need to make that explicit. Um, And there's some
Yeah,
other
just like
things.
some quick montage of like he
Yeah,
was behind this all
he
along.
was behind it all along, and I was like, "Yeah, I mean, we knew, right? We knew that
Yeah, yeah.
the whole time."
And then we get this the final scene, this sort
Very
of like
American Psycho.
yeah, American Psycho, Buffalo Bill in Silence of the
Yeah.
Lambs. Like I'm going to dance around naked,
Murder
dick
on the
flopping
dance
everywhere
floor.
in and in my new estate because
Yeah,
I
it's his estate,
won.
and he dances around, totally naked, and
It's kind of how I dance in my apartment, to be honest.
well, then you're a good dancer. I thought it was a good scene.
I'm a
Like,
pretty good
just
dancer.
at the raw level of, like, it's a fun scene. He's a good dancer. It's like
He has a nice
he's
butt.
he has a nice butt. It's like a successfully I thought it was a successful iteration of, like, the creepy guy dance. Like, it's kind of a trope. Like, I felt like it felt like a tropish moment of, like, yeah, it's what the serial killer does. They have, like, their dance number where it shows that, like, none of this meant anything to them. Like, they don't care.
Yeah, and, and
Like,
and he has his but what do serial killers call
his
their
trophies.
trophies? He has
Yeah, the
his
little
trophies, the
rocks,
rocks. Yeah, on the little
placed
diorama.
uh-huh, in the center of the ballroom. And to me, and we don't I think interestingly, after Rosamund Pike falls ill or dies, we never see another servant at the house. Like, you might assume he inherits Saltburn and is just a lord now, and he's just a rich aristocrat, but I kinda think he's not. Um, I don't think there's any staff left. We don't see proof of it, at least. He's dancing around completely naked throughout the whole estate, and we don't see anyone, and, like, there would be servants in these rooms. Like, and he has his trophies clearly laid out on this, like, ballroom dining table. Like, it's it's clear that he murdered these people,
Yeah.
He's not hiding it, and that's why I think his motivation was not money and not love. I think he just I think he just hated them. Like, I think he loved and hated them. I think he loved them and was jealous of them. I think he hated himself for loving them and being jealous of them. And I
Do
think
you think
his
he's a sociopath?
yeah, I mean, I don't clinical, I don't know, but I think he's just a serial killer who found this victim and, like, took pride in the fact that his victim was, like he's like a hyena hunting a lion. Like, it's proof. Like, he picked the greatest prey he could have picked. He went to
Yes,
Oxford.
interesting.
Yeah, he went to Oxford, and it's like a predator going to Earth and searching for the strongest warrior to hunt because that's proof of his ability as a hunter. I think that's what he did, and I think that was his motivation. I think he's a hunter.
It's a game.
It's a game, and he won.
Hmm.
And I don't think he cares about the house. Like, I don't think he's gonna
And sexuality was a tool. It wasn't a motivation.
sex was a tool, and, like, I think his sexuality, I think the movie is kinda told from his perspective, and the only sort of yearning, like, genuinely tender expressions of attraction are towards Felix. But, like, that could also be the kind of longing and lust that a hunter feels for its prey.
I was gonna say
Um,
it doesn't feel tender. It
it's not
feels
tender, that was the wrong word, but it's like, fetishizing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's a fetish
Yeah,
object to him, which is why he really only like releases, so to
yeah,
speak, once he's dead.
right, exactly. Like, Felix had to be first.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, like, I know there's people who don't like the ending. I enjoyed the ending. I It was kind of silly, it was kind of abrupt. Like, I had fun, and then I read reviews being like, "The ending's not good," or I saw that reviews said that, and, like, on retrospect, I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I guess it was kinda tried or overblown." He does his little American Psycho dance, but, like, that's kind of part of the point. Like, first of all, it's 2020. Oliver would have probably seen American Psycho. Like, Oliver knows all these tropes as much as we do. He's successfully hunted, like, some of the greatest prey in the world, and yeah, I don't know. Like, it is kind of silly, and I think that's all part of it. Like none of this fucking matters.
There's definitely a theme of like genre bending I've seen in
Mhm.
movies. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once did this really successfully and was sort of like the apex of it. But I recently watched Bottoms, which is another
Which I haven't seen yet.
could be a
Yeah,
good one for us to talk
I've
about.
been
Very
told it's very good. Yeah,
very queer, but it does a similar thing where like the tone shifts multiple times. Where you're like, what is the genre of this movie? And
yeah,
I think the success of like horror movie, like A24 horror movies that are like teen comedies that are also like slasher flicks. That's sort of what like this felt like. It felt like there was a slasher
yeah,
element towards it towards the end. Um,
yeah.
but
It leaned into like a kind of schlock that had not been present.
yeah, right. Whereas like the first two-thirds of it feel very like Victorian
Hmm.
and period drama and taking from those kind of ideas, and then the last third really gets modern with it.
Yeah,
Which like you said, critics, different people decide whether or not that was successful. I think a lot of
right.
people decided it wasn't successful. I think I'll be thinking about this movie for a long time,
Yeah, it was
which to me
definitely.
is the sign of a good movie.
I agree. Like at this point, I feel like I feel like at this point, so many movies have been made. So many stories have been told and retold and retold and retold. And like there's nothing wrong with making a solid iteration of a film. Like that's totally fine. But I think like the more interesting movies tend to be the ones that know that they're movies and know that they're a viewing experience and give you an interesting experience. Like they know that we are all affluenza inflicted aristocrats trying to gobble up meaning from the lives that are being presented to us. And so they want to make that experience interesting and enjoyable because ultimately their purpose is to keep us entertained in our existentially empty descent into the void.
On that note, I have one final question for
Okay.
you about the movie. Um, why do you think it's called Saltburn? Both the manor and the movie. What do you think that name means?
Yeah, like why'd they name the movie that? Why did the writer name it Saltburn, the
Right.
manor?
I ended up looking up because I wrote down all these names of authors who this reminded me of, and I looked up like what are the manors in those called? Like is Saltburn a very obvious like there's like a pepper freeze
Hmm.
somewhere, and they're
Hmm.
just like making a take on that. But there's not really. It's like Pemberley and like other British sounding names. Saltburn feels very intentional, and it doesn't really feel like a reference. And so I'm curious
Yeah.
if you have thoughts as to why is it called that.
So like being you can actually burn yourself with salt, kind of. Like salt lowers the freezing point of water. And did you ever do the thing with like salt and ice as a kid?
Where you can, like, make ice cream out of it?
So you can do that, but also the other thing that dumb kids, including myself, have been known to do is the salt and ice challenge, where you like put some salt on like your arm and then you put an ice cube on it, and the salt lowers the temperature of the ice so much that it burns because you are giving yourself frostbite. Um,
Oh, wow.
but it's like, yeah, it's
What I
it's a
was thinking
thing
of
that
is, like,
people do to
is
themselves.
the phrase, like, "pour salt in the wound."
I think there's that too. But I think what's interesting, so here, like I just looked it up, and here's it's a common challenge that people do, and it was popular in this time. Like I remember doing it
To
as a kid,
burn yourself with salt.
2006. And to quote the Wikipedia article about it, due to the numbing sensation of the cold and possible nerve damage resulting from the stunt, participants are often unaware of the extent of any injuries sustained during the challenge and only feel the pain once the salt on their skin enters the lesions that they've created in themselves.
Wow.
So to me, it's a reference to that. It's like they are so numb and that they don't understand the extent to which they're putting themselves in danger until it's too late and they've done genuine harm.
It's like what is the opposite of delayed gratification? It's like delayed harm or something.
Yeah, like they exactly. Like it's an insidious kind of pain because it numbs you first and then it harms you.
Hmm.
And so you have to like be on the lookout for the harm, and if you're not, then you can very easily get more hurt than you intended to by dabbling in this what is a stunt that people would do to entertain themselves out of boredom. Um,
Wow.
so that's what I think it's a reference to.
I think that's an excellent reading of the name. I never would have gotten there. I wasn't familiar with this challenge, but
Yeah.
no, the way you just described it, I think that's exactly the point of the movie.
Yeah. So if I had to guess, that's what she's coming from. I can't point to anything where she references it.
No, because it's not really explained, and it's a memorable title, but it like why is this manor called that? It doesn't sound like a typical English manor. So I think your explanation is satisfying.
The other thing it might be a reference to is more the idea of like salting the earth, or like burning. Like both salting and burning are ways of committing a complete destruction of a people,
Mm.
and like that's what he does to this family. You know,
That's what it means to pour salt in the wound, right? Like you're already
well, I mean, they're
hurt, and
like
so
if
you're like
you
making it worse.
yeah that, but I mean like salting the earth and like if you sack a village and then you pour salt on all their fields so they can't even grow crops to recover.
Yeah, it's like the Sherman's March to the Sea.
Right. Yeah. Um, so it could be
Just
that
like
too.
kill everyone and burn their ability to even grow anything in the future.
Yeah. He's ended this family line,
Yeah, true.
you know? Like Farley survives, like Farley is one of these relatives, but he's been completely cut off. Like he's killed this aristocratic family and yeah, he's completely ended it. So it could be a reference to that as well.
And the weird thing is, I mean, like I said about the menu and triangles of sadness, I don't think we feel bad
Oh
for
no, I don't care about them.
anyone. We don't really care that this
I feel
aristocratic they were parasites in and of themselves.
yeah,
No one's good in this movie.
the only one I kind of feel bad for, I do feel bad for Farley, kind of. Um, in that like yes, he's a parasite on these rich people, but also like his mom clearly has real problems. And like Farley to me is a character who he's not so completely distanced from reality as these other people are. Like he seems to come from genuine like I think it's suggested that his mom's an addict. Um and and yet he has access to this life that he knows is awful and fake and like disgusts him. Like he very clearly is disgusted by it all too. But he's doing what he has to do to survive in the system he finds himself in. And like I think we can all relate to that. Like that is what these systems of inequality and it's like what capitalism does to you now where everyone's like, what is the compromise I'm willing to make to survive in this system that I know is fucked up, but I also have to get through it at the end of the day. Um, so that's why I feel bad for him, like to that extent. And I feel bad for Valencia because
Yeah, I feel
what
bad
was
for
she
him too.
supposed to do? Like
Yeah.
she's born into it and she's not the one who brought Oliver in.
That is some
And
affluenza right there.
yeah, she's total affluenza. And then she gets murdered. Like she gets murdered because she's there.
Mhm.
But like, so I felt bad for her. Her life seemed miserable. And, honestly, her parents are probably exactly the same. Like, this is generations and generations of that pattern. So, I don't know. Like, I'm not like, oh no, the rich people died. But I have empathy for these people because I think their lives are empty and painful despite all of the wealth.
So, I love a framework. I love a rating. I love a list.
Sure, you do like a
Um,
list. Okay, we're going to have official grades here.
I was gonna say, can we develop our own internal system of grading,
Okay.
rating?
Yeah, how are we going to rate movies? Um,
It's not just movies, right? Because we
yeah,
want to
just
be open
stuff, all
to
things. We're going to put
all
all
things.
things on a comprehensive ranking system. I
Yeah.
mean, we can use the classic like S tier, A tier kind of vibes, and then there's like tiers. But
Hmm.
do you want it more like
More
fully
like
ordered?
us.
Okay. I don't know. What do you suggest? I'm not. You're the rankings guy.
I know. I'm trying to come up with something related to LGBTQ, but I don't think we can.
Okay, how about this? On a scale of 1 to 39, how do you rate Saltburn?
Ooh, wait, why 39? Can we do
Random.
37?
Sure, that's your favorite number.
That's my favorite number.
Yeah. All right, on a scale of 1 to 37, how do you rate Saltburn?
I love this. Um, 1 being the worst, 37 being the best.
Yeah.
I'd say this is a somewhere in the 20s. Maybe like a 24.
Hmm. Yeah,
What's
I'm
the midpoint of 1 and 37?
18 and a half.
So yeah, I'd say it's better than average, but
Yeah.
not stellar. 24. Yeah, I feel good about that.
Yeah, I'll give it like a 27. So like a 25 and a half is our combined rating. A 25 and a half out of 37 is the official rating of Saltburn. Um,
That is giving Nerd Squad.
that's giving Nerd Squad. Uh, yeah, so that's pretty good. 25 and a half out of 37.
I'd
Um,
say, yeah. I think definitely I liked it more than I thought I would, and more than critics would make me believe that I would.
yeah. Yeah. The thing we didn't get to, like this episode has to end because we've been talking for too long, but the thing we didn't touch on that if we come back to this movie, we can talk about, or if it comes up in the future thing. Do you know much about Emerald Fennell's background?
I don't.
What do you think it is based on this movie? And let me tell you, let me give you a quote that she said about this, the
I
production of this
thought that
film.
she started as an actor and
She
then
did start as an actor.
became a director.
So she said, in writing the film, Fennell wanted to sympathize with unlikable people, saying, quote, the sorts of people that we can't stand, the sorts of people who are abhorrent. If we can love them, if we can fall in love with these people, if we can understand why this is so alluring, in spite of its palpable cruelty and unfairness and sort of strangeness, if we all want to be there too, I think that's just such an interesting dynamic. Which I found fascinating because I was like, I didn't see that in this movie. I wouldn't love anyone.
Hmm. No, me neither.
Yeah,
Well, I guess you're supposed to love Felix in a way, but
kind of.
I would say this was an interesting sophomore uh, attempt. I think Promising Young Woman is so good. I
I
would be
haven't seen that.
curious. I'd be happy to do a rewatch of that and talk about it, especially in light of it's the same director. I think that's a much better movie than this.
Yeah. So this, I found this out after because I looked up the director, and I thought it was really interesting. She grew up really fucking rich. Her dad is a jewelry designer with his own Wikipedia page. Um, and like they're from. She doesn't have like a nobility title, but they're from British money. Like her dad went to Eton. Uh,
I sort of
and
imagined that she was British. I didn't think that she could tell this story as an American, so I figured she
no,
was
no,
British.
I assume she was British, and I assume she went to Oxford, which she did.
Hmm.
Um, but she's like rich, rich. She's like British high society. So from
So she's
Wikipedia,
taking the piss out of herself.
Fennell's 18th birthday, documented by British high society magazine Tatler, was attended by socialite Poppy Delevingne, Cara Delevingne's older sister, Lady Alexandra Gordon Lennox, the daughter of the 11th Duke of Richmond, and Alice Rogue Price, the great granddaughter of the 7th Rogue Price Baronet. Um, so like
She's an
it's
insider.
it's interesting because like she's not an Oliver. She is
She's a Felix.
she's a Felix, or maybe a Farley. Like maybe she's not the Lord, but she was friends with them and spending her summers at their estates. You know,
Right.
like um.
That's the
So
only way you can tell a movie like this, though. So it doesn't surprise
I
me.
don't think it undercuts it or anything. I don't say that to be like, oh, this is illegitimate. I just thought it was interesting, like because it does surprise. It did surprise me, but it
I
also
think
like
I think that part of the reason, like again, comparing it to her first movie, that movie had such a clear message
hmm,
and vision that hadn't been uh, told in such a cohesive way. This movie, I don't know what it's about. Like we just talked for an hour and 30 minutes about it, And I think it's about a lot of things, but I don't think I'm leaving with like a message. I'm leaving with like a bunch of different ideas about
Yeah,
what was
I mean,
this
I don't
really
think it's
about?
about anything. I think it's a story. Like she wanted to tell a story.
But your quote I found interesting because it doesn't feel like her reasoning for like what I got from it isn't her intention, which isn't a bad thing. Oftentimes that's like a sign of good
Yeah,
art, right? It's interesting though in the sense of like I get why so many people didn't like this movie because you don't get a message from this. You don't
yeah.
leave having a cohesive like, oh, that's what this was about.
And
You're
I
like,
don't know
why
that
did
that quote was her saying this is what Saltburn was about.
mm,
It seemed like she was talking about her like the initial impetus for writing a story about this. She was saying like I love these period pieces. I love these like manor estate stories. I wanted to write one, but like you have to walk this line of a story in which you want to love these people and write about these characters while also like being aware of the palpable cruelty and insanity of what that world is. So I think the movie was more her trying to grapple with that of like, what does it mean to love and hate these people?
mhm.
And and she ended up writing a story about a guy who murders them all. So
Yeah, and it got a 25.5 out of 37.
I got a 25.5 out of 37, which is solid. Like we're both critical, like if we think a
Yeah, that's
movie is
true.
average, we're gonna give it an 18 and a half.
For sure.
We're not gonna give it a 29.
We don't experience great inflation here.
Yeah. So 25 and a half out of 37. Congratulations to you, director Fennell, because you're setting the benchmark. Who knows where things will fall
Who
in the
knows where we're gonna
future?
go from here? So, Sarah, speaking of that, I had fun on our first episode of this
I had
podcast.
great fun.
What can our listeners expect moving forward?
Hopefully, shorter, more focused reviews that are closer to an hour than an hour and 45. But yeah, just more of this, like talking about stuff. It might be movies, it might be a game. I know Scott wants to talk about albums. Talking about social things. Just we're nerds, and we're just two nerds who like talking about shit and would have these conversations anyway. So might
So
as well
why not
record
record
them.
them? Yeah,
Yeah,
I just get to spend
and
time with you. That's what's fun for
yeah,
me.
we're just hanging out. And
Yeah.
if you're listening and you like us and you want to develop any sort of like deep parasocial attachment to us, that's fine. If you
We
would
welcome
like
it, actually.
if you would like to join us at our palatial estate this summer, please ingratiate yourselves, to worm your way into our lives. And if you happen to murder us and take over our podcasting throne, so be it. Like we deserve it, probably.
I'm okay with it as long
Yeah,
as it's part of a narrative. I'm welcome to my role in that narrative.
yeah. Well, thanks for talking to me about it, Scott, and thanks to you, imaginary viewer, for listening. Scott, you're my best friend. I'm your best friend, but I think really the listener is our best friend.
There are yes. Thank you, listener, viewer, all one of you. And I'll talk to you later, Sarah.
Talk to you later, Scott.
Bye.
Bye. And if you're watching on the live stream, haha, joke's on you. The podcast episode's over, but we're still alive. Ah. Just kidding. We're ending the live stream now.